Hey everybody, Brett from Love Bats and the Belfry back for another video. I have Golden Boy here who's just saying hello to you all. You know him if you've seen any of my videos. He's quite the shy guy, but he does like to make his presence known. I'm here to talk about a particular movie that I finally got around to watching, and that is Longlegs. This was quite the movie with quite the amount of hype behind it. This was directed by Oz Perkins, and some of his stuff in his filmography is Blackcoat's Daughter, I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House, Gretel and Hansel, and now this. I'll start off by saying Longlegs is already his most accessible movie. If you've seen any of his other movies, he's a pretty slow burn type of filmmaker. He goes more of like by atmosphere rather than narrative. But with Longlegs, the biggest difference I noticed, it does play out like as kind of a slow burn, but it is very driven by its narrative. And with the plot of this movie, it is very much like almost a crime thriller. I would count it in some sense as horror because there are some pretty horrific things that happen in this movie. Overall, I really enjoyed Longlegs. I don't think it's going to be a movie I want to like watch all the time. I might go back and watch it sometime later, but I don't see this as a movie that I would go back to super often. I'm sure a lot of people have really enjoyed this movie, maybe it's probably one of their favorite movies that came out this year. I don't know if it was one of my favorites, but I definitely enjoyed myself watching this. I think across the board, this was just a solid movie. Honestly, though, I just didn't feel much from it. Maybe because I guess my big negative, I'm sure there's tons of reviews out there on YouTube or people in general who have talked about this movie, that how predictable it is. It's definitely very predictable. You see most stuff coming from a mile away. At least my rule with movies that are predictable, like if its presentation is really solid across the board, I really don't complain too much if it's predictable. And that's kind of the case here. It is a downside because you just see how everything's going to play out. It's too easy to predict, and that's exactly how it plays out. But everything, the way it's filmed, the way it's made, is pretty solid. I really loved the way this movie played out. One of the biggest positives I will say about Longlegs is the fact that it has a supernatural element that doesn't really take you out of it. I'm sure some people will watch Longlegs who haven't seen it and be like, ugh, it did a supernatural angle, and probably hate that. But honestly, it did it really well. It did it in a way that, like, this movie seems so grounded in reality, but has this supernatural element that's presented with part of its narrative and how things play out that you kind of buy it. It kind of works. And that's what I really loved about it. Maika Monroe, she, like, she kind of blew up from It Follows, and then we didn't really see her in like much stuff. She was in a lot of indie stuff after that. I remember she was in that movie Greta that kind of sucked. She was in Watcher, which I think I tried to watch and fell asleep on, but I have to go back and check that out. I saw the trailer to this movie, like in the teaser, at least the teaser trailer, where it was like only a minute, and you were like, all right, some sort of like murder type film. Looks awesome. Like, the trailer to this and the marketing to this was fantastic, I would say that. And I am definitely a big fan of Oz Perkins as far as his filmmaking style goes and everything. I could see a lot of people already who have seen his other movies saying this is his best movie. And I mean, I'm not going to fault you for saying that because I think this has the most accessibility out of all of his other movies. Blackcoat's Daughter was super slow burn. The first time I watched it, I wasn't so crazy about it, but I'm a fan of, some people could say I'm a fan of boring movies, or I could say that I'm a fan of slow burn movies, and I am a fan of atmosphere in movies. And Oz Perkins does a fantastic job with atmosphere. I would say his weakest film is I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House. Gretel and Hansel I love because it is a take on the classic fairy tale, but the atmosphere is fantastic. I love the performances in that movie. And it's the ultimate movie to watch if you want to get into the fall or Halloween spirit. It really captures that fall like atmosphere, like being out in the woods. It's great. And that's the reason I watch Gretel and Hansel a lot, is because like if I feel like I just want to be in that like spooky fall mood, which we already are, it's officially kicked off. I'm going to see Beetlejuice tonight, so I'm sure that's going to put me in the spirit even more. But I mean, getting back to Longlegs, I mean, yeah, Maika Monroe does a fantastic job as the lead in this movie. She really carries the movie, despite like what her character is all about. She's this, like, you can just tell she's just full of anxiety like all the time, and for good reason. I mean, when you go into the nitty gritty of this movie of why, you'll basically find out why she is the way she is, and that's for good reason, and why she became an FBI agent. It's kind of the same type of thing with like a lot of people are going to compare this to Silence of the Lambs, and countless people, like acquaintances, coworkers of mine, are like, "Oh, it's like Silence of the Lambs. It's great." And you know, I understand the comparison, but at the same time, I feel like it's unfair to kind of compare this to Silence of the Lambs, because they are pretty different movies. I mean, they have similar. They take stuff from kind of Silence of the Lambs of like that style, but the way this movie's presented is very different. Person I feel like who steals the show is Nicolas Cage. I am a huge fan. I love a lot of his movies. I mean, granted, he's in a lot of really terrible movies, but when Nicolas Cage is given material that he cares about, he does an amazing job. And like stuff like Pig, he did a great job on. This as well, he did a great job on playing a serial killer. There was only like one moment of this movie that I actually saw like Nick Cage isms, and it was a scene that involved him in a car when he was just driving, and like you saw Nick Cage really come out in that scene. But most of the other scenes in this movie, like you kind of saw Nicolas Cage as a character he decided to be, but also with the prosthetics on his face, like it really like gave him a lot to work with. Not that Silence of the Lambs is exactly a happy movie, but it kind of resolves in a fairly realistic sense, where you can kind of buy it. It's like Hannibal Lecter like escapes from prison and is just out on the loose, and you can kind of see that, like, the mind trickery that he pulls on everybody. Like, you do see it. With this movie, the way it plays out is not so happy. It's not so good of an ending. It's pretty horrific, and I hate to know how Maika Monroe's character, I think her name was Lee Harker in the movie. It's like, I hate to see what Lee Harker is like after the whole thing wrapped up. Getting into spoilers, like Nicolas Cage dies in this movie. He dies in the interrogation room because he pretty much is all about satanic worship, like satanic panic, like in the 80s and stuff. And like he literally just like bashes his head open on the table that he's sitting at, and he ends up dying that way. And I like that the rest of the movie kind of plays out like he plays such a crucial part in the movie, but he's not everything to the movie, because there's like pretty much at like the climax of the movie, when there's like one act to go, like Nicolas Cage character is dead. And I kind of like that about it, because the rest of the movie, like, it's how like Hannibal Lecter is in Silence of the Lambs. And granted, yeah, I'm comparing it to Silence of the Lambs, but like how Hannibal Lecter isn't a huge character in that movie, but he steals the show. And that's kind of how Nicolas Cage is in Longlegs, where he's not shown much, but when he is, like, you remember it. And like, after his character gets killed off, like, you still feel his presence through the rest of this movie, even though he's dead. And I love the last shot of the movie where, like, after basically everyone dies except Lee Harker, and like it gets to the very end of the movie, and then it just like cuts to Nicolas Cage like in the interrogation room, just like laughing maniacally, like in just this really creepy fashion. And then he's like, "Hail Satan!" Like, it's so funny. And like, I thought that was a nice touch to wrap up the movie. Like, despite how horrific everything plays out, and what, basically everyone around Lee Harker dies, like, in her social circle, her work circle, like, everyone's dead. Her mother's dead. I still have really enjoyed this movie. Yeah, I don't think it's among, like one of the best movies I've seen as of recently. I've just seen movies that I think I've had a lot more fun with, but I'm not faulting this movie. If you think this movie was great and you were like, this is the best movie of the year, yeah, I'm not going to fault you for that, because I can totally see the appeal and why people really love this movie. But yet, a big downside to this is its predictability. But I love the filmmaking style. I love how, like, this whole thing, this whole satanic panic was through Nicolas Cage being a doll maker. And I don't know, that was fascinating to me, and how that supernatural element played into, like, the result of everything. And normally, like, I'm sure some people didn't buy it and thought it was stupid, but I thought it really, really worked. I mean, I'm going to keep my thoughts as short as I possibly can. I feel like I was pretty short with my thoughts on this, but then again, my reviews tend to go pretty long. So I'm going to wrap that up on Longlegs. My wife and I watched The Deliverance on Netflix last night, and I'll just say, not a good one. But I will say, if you want a very entertaining 2 hours, that for better or for worse, The Deliverance might help you out on that. Yeah, one of those religious movies that gets really, really far-fetched, but I won't lie, I had a lot of fun with it. It's terrible, but my taste is very questionable, because I love critically amazing movies, and I love just complete trash. So take that as you will. Hopefully you enjoyed my review of Longlegs, and that will wrap up another Brett's Horror Vlog. Give me a thumbs up on the video, subscribe to the channel. I'm a very spooky guy, I'm a horror guy. I also happen to like wrestling sometimes, so you see some wrestling stuff on the channel here and there. I just tend to like talk about a little bit of everything, but relatively I'm mostly a spooky guy, and Golden Boy, for good reason, just kind of hanging in the background. So yeah, I hope you all have enjoyed, and I will see you in a future video. Bye.